Welcome to the Trigger Warning Talk podcast, where we have uncensored conversations, we exchange information, and we provide resources for all the listeners and the viewers. We are worldwide. We are streaming on 12 platforms. You can also watch these interviews on Spotify, as well as our YouTube channel, which is my company, Penton Pending Consulting Solutions, LLC. If you're triggered at any point during this podcast, please call 911 if you need help immediately. If you don't need immediate help, that's okay. We got a bunch of resources for those that are dealing with suicide issues. Call 988. That number is available toll-free and 24/7 here in the States. If you live outside of the U.S., call your local emergency hotline. If you have issues with anything like domestic violence, human and sex trafficking, we have those numbers and websites also. If you have issues with substance abuse, we have the numbers to E.A and I. And we also got a licensed mental health and substance abuse counselor in the building. My brother, the one and only, as I call him, Mr. E.A. Everybody else calls him E.A. But I call him Mr. E.A. Erick Allen. Welcome to the Trigger Warning Talk podcast. And I always tell y'all need to watch these interviews because I always share stuff on the screen and you don't get the full effect. But we love our listeners. So if you're listening on any of the major platforms like iHeartRadio and Amazon Music and Audible, and I can go on and on and on, of course, Apple and Google Podcasts, that's beautiful. Mr. E.A., peace and blessings be upon you forevermore. We got a great conversation. This is going to be a banger because we're doing a 3-part series. As everybody knows, we've been doing series this year, started last year in December, but we're going to talk about Mr. E.A. and his story, his life dealing with domestic violence from a different perspective. Because a lot of times people think of domestic violence and they think about it's only something that we don't really want to talk about, or if we want to talk about it, it's only a bunch of women having that conversation about it. And when I met Mr. E.A., it was in this app called Clubhouse. So shout out to Clubhouse for introducing me to my brother from another mother, my sisters from another mother, like his wife, the beautiful Talibah Allen. I interviewed her last year. Her interview was popping. It's still going on my analytics. You know, we got our other sister that we're going to be bringing into the Trigger Warning Talk podcast, Queen herself, Cassandra Mitchell, a.k.a. Loyalty. We have such a great group of friends. I say that I got more relatives than family. And Mr. E.A. is one of my family. It's not by blood, but by the symbiotic relationships we have. Yeah. But I'm going to stop because I want to say hey to you. What's going on, Mr. E.A.?
Man, I'm blessed beyond measurement. Man, I'm just excited, super excited to be here, man. I've been seeing you grow in this platform, and I was just waiting for my moment. And here it is. So, yes, I'm excited. I'm telling you, man, Trigger Warning Talk podcast has been growing. I've seen ever since my wife was a guest, I've been watching the show and I love it.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. You know what? We're just going to jump into it because every guest that comes on the Trigger Warning Talk podcast, I tell them it's my podcast, but it's your interview. It's not about your brother. You know, I could have done a soliloquy-based podcast, but I didn't want to do that. And no disrespect to anybody else that has one of those. I just want the guests to know that you have a voice, you have a platform, and you can say whatever the hell you want because this is uncensored conversations. Now, if you have any kids that are going to be watching this, anybody under 18, I say it's not made for anybody under 18, but if you want your child or whoever's in your care to watch and or listen to this, just be right there with them because you may hear or they may hear some adult language. We don't censor anybody. This real talk is blunt, not brutal, blunt honesty, because that's very intentional and we want to be intentional. So, Mr. E.A., you're going to be doing about 70% of the conversation today.
Okay.
I want you to start. Tell us where you're from.
So, I am from the great state of Oregon, from the Pacific Northwest. I travel abroad just doing the work as a licensed mental health and substance abuse counselor, but I got a house in Oregon, but I'm all over.
I know, man. I just want to see your frequent flyer miles. Because I got a couple of trips coming up. We'll talk later. Growing up in
Absolutely.
growing up in Oregon, what was that? Because how old are you?
So it's crazy that you asked. Like Oregon, when I was growing up, it was 3% people of color.
Oh,
Now it's different. The analytics have grown a little bit, so now we doubled in size. We're 6%, and it was just challenging. I grew up in the 90s, 80s, 90s. Come from a drug affected home. Mom had an addiction. Pops was an enabler, and it was one hell of a ride. And as I got older, I just wanted to I wanted to do, I wanted to not be what I was growing up to be. So like we grew up very underprivileged, underserved. So like money was scarce, opportunities were even more scarce, right? So I pride myself as I grew up to just be a pillar, I'm always looking for resources. I'm always, and in my early years, I just took a vow to never, ever, ever be broke. I'm gonna work for it. Okay.
when I thought about interviewing you, and it's been a long time, I heard an
Yes.
interview that you did a couple of years ago with our sister, Miss Virginia, who is a psychologist by trade. And this
Absolutely.
is during Men's Mental Health Month. And I said, your story is so powerful. I also wanted to let the audience hear that because everybody's not on Clubhouse. Some people have never even heard of it.
Right.
I want you to give us your story because again, we're doing a 3-part. So this part 1 is about your story. Part 2, we're going to talk about in a few minutes towards the end because I got to give you something to hold on to, and the audience will understand. But you wrote,
Absolutely.
you got something on Amazon that's going to lead into the part 2. But we'll talk about that.
Okay. I see you.
And then the 3rd part, because you are a counselor, you deal with drug and alcohol abuse, and you are a qualified mental health advocate, we always talk about modalities. You've heard me say this before.
I
We
have.
don't do just dialogue. That's for people that want to go to these other platforms and just want to talk.
Right.
I always say if you want me to be a part of something, it got to be an action plan tied to it because otherwise I can sit on the couch binge watching Paternity Court with this LP picking the lint on my belly button. Don't involve me. Don't involve EA because that man is he's a Jamaican in another lifetime. I believe. You got some Jamaican roots. I need you to do an ancestry.com. But we'll talk about it. We're going to talk about, and this part 1 is entitled Affirmed Recovery, and that's a play on something that we'll talk about in the end or at the end. I want you to talk about your story dealing with domestic violence and why your story is very unique. Because you're going to talk from someone who was the perpetrator of it and how you overcame that. The mic is yours, sir.
So thank you again, LP, for having me. I love every opportunity I can to share my story because as a counselor, talk therapy is crucial. And just being able to be heard, just being able to say things is therapy. So I encourage anybody that has a story to tell, keep telling your story, right? So for me, I grew up in an underprivileged, underserved home. I'm my father's only child. And I grew up in an abusive home where my mother was the shot caller. We'll just call her the shot caller, right? My dad, he wasn't real big in disciplinarian. He was just more of a talker. Like if I did something wrong, he would talk to me. My mom, she'd get in my ass. Like, and it's crazy because my mom is 4'11". Imagine my mother is 4'11". My father is 6'2". So just imagine a 4'11" woman disciplining me, right? It was crazy. So again, I grew up in an underprivileged, underserved home. My mother struggled with drug abuse, drug addiction, and what I saw as abusing my father, right? She didn't abuse him like with her hands or anything, but she in my opinion, she abused him emotionally.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's kind of what I grew up in, and that's what, as I grew up, I vowed to never be, like what I saw my father as, like on that side. My father's a great man, very simple man. Yeah, he's a lover. I shot him out just for the man that I am today. However, some of the things that I grew up watching, like him going through with my mother, it affected me on how I looked at women. And I just, like, some of the things I saw in the home, it just made me be like, okay, when I grow up, I'm gonna change. I'm gonna be the change that I want to see. So I abused women based on what I saw my mother do to my father. I felt like I had to pay women back for what my father went through, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
How did that transition into your adult life?
So I had the pleasure of meeting the beautiful, what I call my life partner. I had a pleasure of meeting her. I met her in 7th grade, and we're now married, 15 years married, 2 children. I have a 26-year-old daughter that's getting married in a couple of weeks. I ain't that nothing. And then I have a 17-year-old son that's senior in high school. So how it transitioned, I saw I saw the things that hindered my growth as a child, and then I became the hindrance. I started selling drugs, started being very mannish. One thing led to another, landed in prison for 3 years. And during that 3 years is when I really decided to just get my shit together, because it was either that or a lifetime of being a criminal. And it's just, and I just didn't want it. I did not want to be a criminal. I did not like the stigma that comes with being a criminal. I don't like how people treat you. I don't like not being able to have the things that I want and deserve. So I just changed my life. I did the 3 years. I got on my knees, prayed to the Father, and I just asked him, moving forward, to lead my steps. You know how people they say find God in jail? That wasn't what it was. It was just more like I strengthened my relationship with God while I was in jail. I had nothing but time to focus. So I did that, and by the grace of God, I'm here. I'm now heavy into rebuilding the community that I once destroyed. Yeah.
As someone who was a returning citizen, and you're in this relationship with Mrs. Talibah Allen, Miss Tea Time with T, and she is such a wonderful person. I mean,
ain't she? I'm so blessed to have her.
You know what? I gotta take a pause here.
Yes.
I need to do another interview with her, because she just started this LLC, and she's this gardener extraordinaire. Like, I don't even want to call her a gardener, because it just sounds cheesy. Like, she needs something more exotic.
Gardener is big. Gardener is big because there's no.
I'm just saying, for me, it just sounds like it doesn't give her enough props, because she is just phenomenal, man. Like, I'm looking at her IG and the stuff that she's growing, and it's very organic, and like she has stuff going on all across the country that she's doing with this garden. Mm-hmm. It's just phenomenal.
Absolutely.
We'll talk about it. How did your reactions and your interactions in your relationship with Tea Time turn to the negative?
Great question. So I've been knowing Tea Time, Talibah, aka Talibah. I've been knowing her since 7th grade. Of course, there's been ups, downs, sideways, all in betweens. The blessing is she stood by my side while I did my prison sentence. And when I got out of prison, I definitely, I fell off a little bit. Everything was good. We had a great relationship. We built a relationship while I was in prison. And then when I got out, I just dropped the ball. We lived together for like 7 months. And then I moved on my own because I wanted to experience life. I wanted to, I had been in a relationship all my life. You know what I'm saying? So like I grew up, I had a girlfriend in 9th grade, and all the way throughout high school I had a girlfriend. And then meeting Talibah, or, transitioning with Talibah, she became my girlfriend, and I abused her like nobody's business. And I abused her in the form of just, when you're young, you don't know better. Like I wanted multiple women. I thought that I wanted to be in a what they call polyamory.
Polyamorous.
Yeah, I thought that's what I wanted until I drunk some of the water, and I just decided, like, oh my goodness, this is just it's just beyond me. I cannot please two women at the same time, especially if they, when they know about each other. It's impossible. It became an impossible mission. So these days, I just, I'm learning how to love her to the best of my abilities through my trauma, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was a young guy. I remember being when I turned 21, I was a wild boy. I was in a relationship. I wasn't married yet. We had 3 kids at that time. So Larry Jr. and then the twins. And man, when I turned 21, my family, some of my cousins, they own a bunch of nightclubs.
Damn.
And I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, so people like Nelly and some of these other cats that came, Chingy, and a lot of the artists that would come into town for concerts, Maxwell, and like my cousin Lynn, her and her husband Erick, the Galloways, they owned a lot of these nightclubs that were primarily in East St. Louis, but they had some in St. Louis also. And I'm telling you, she had a photo book that I'm telling you would be worth probably hundreds of thousands with all the celebrities that she met. And so I remember going to the clubs because I would get everybody in free that came with me. They were my friends. They became part of the family. And I remember being in these polyamorous relationships, even though I was with the mother of my children. We lived together. I was wrong. I was wrong as all outdoors. I admit it.
Right.
I was wrong. LP was wrong as all outdoors. Fuck it.
Let's talk about it.
See, this is what men need to do. This is part of our barbershop talk that we do and that we've done even on Clubhouse. We admit our wrongs and our faults. You know why? Because it's history. It's in the past. We're not continuing that cycle of ignorance, the young, dumb shit. For you, when you talk about the abuses, and I have a wide, broader view of domestic violence, I don't believe it's just something that happens under your roof and between your 4 walls.
Right.
When you think about DV, what comes to mind? How do you define domestic violence?
I define domestic violence. It has to be a relationship. It's between 2 people, and that's an actual good question. I'm an optimist, so I see the bright side of a lot of things. So even in a domestic violence situation, I have to know a little bit more to know. I mean, I would have to a little bit more before I label it that. But for me, I never consider myself displaying domestic violence. I'm a lover, right? And I have actually hit my wife before. I'll just be honest. I'll be transparent. We had a situation. I'll tell a short story. A couple years ago, I threw an event. I did a date night. I do Portland events just to keep couples intrigued and just to keep the love in the veins or whatever. So I have a series that I call Date Night. I do monthly, where we go out, we get dressed up, we do pretty, we do our thing. So this particular night, my wife she was my wife at the time too. And at the time she had a little too much to drink, right? And we were in a forum, we were socializing. The event was over, and one of my people that was working for us was socializing, talking to us. He was underage. I won't lie. He was underage. He was probably 19 at the time, but the event was for 21 and over, but he worked for us. So of course I let him partake, let him hang out. So at the end, my wife comes up to both of us and she was just laying into him, just going off on him, everything. So I asked her nicely. I said, honey, okay, I got it. I'll deal with it. She just kept going on. I was like, honey, I need you to be quiet, close your mouth. And she, what you talking about? I reached back. I reached back from St. Louis, and I definitely, I smacked her, right? And I justified it by this. This is the theory. Like, I do not support men hitting on women, beating on women. However, in this particular case, I looked at my wife, like I said, I always refer to her as my life partner. So that's like a family member. So sometimes you have to discipline somebody in your family, right? And I do not support men just openly beating up women and doing whatever. But in this particular case, I asked her nicely to calm down, be quiet, blah, blah, blah. But she was letting the alcohol speak for her. So I took it upon myself. I felt like I had to discipline her in order for it to make sense. What else was I going to do? Get into an argument, a shouting match with her? No, I had to restrain her with my hands. Pow, smacked her one time. Of course, the whole audience, the people that were there was like, oh my God, what are you doing? But in my mind, it had to happen because after that slap, no more words. She even apologized to the guy. I think it snapped her out of it, right? So again, I do not support violence against women, but I do advocate. I'm one of those people. I believe that, if you're in a relationship, there are grounds to discipline the other person. So I know I'm gonna get a lot of eggs thrown at me for that, but trust me, if you got to be in a situation to understand the situation. So,
and she, if you guys have not checked out her interview, definitely check out her interview because she gives her story about your relationship also. And I always say, when it comes to marriage, I remember my mom, one of my real close relatives lived with us for a number of years. And I remember she was in this long-term relationship and they had gotten to this altercation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it was just a bunch of yelling and screaming and all this stuff, and sounded like shit was being thrown around downstairs where they were and all this stuff. And I wanted to go down there. My mom stopped me. She was like, hey, you don't get involved, and they were married at the time. You don't get involved in stuff like that.
Right.
I was like, she stopped me because she said, you don't get involved in other people's marriages. Because they have to determine for themselves what's okay, what's not okay, how far to go, how not far to go. Some people accept things, some people don't accept other things. Some people are cool with this, some people are not cool with that. You don't have the right to tell that person what's right for them in that moment for their marriage. Now, there are situations where, you may have to intercede and interject, especially if it's a life, if it's a lethal thing going on, if it's a thing that can cause them to die or be seriously hurt or what have you. She said, but outside of that, especially when you know that this is something that's going on and it may sound contrary to the work that you do now, the work that I have been part of since 2006. I'm just telling you, everybody that has a relationship, especially in a marriage, you're walking on eggshells when you get involved in this stuff. I interviewed a lady before, and she said her friend's husband was very physically abusive to her, and she would come over there, seeking shelter. And the last time she came over, she was like, stop. If you're not ready to say, I'm done, you might as well go back home.
True.
Now, if you're ready to be done, I'll let you come in, shelter you. We're going to call the cops. He's not coming in here. I'm going to let him know that he can't come in here and all that stuff. And I'll help you with whatever you need to do to transition. But you got to let me know that this is it. And the lady said, okay. And from that point, she helped her, and she's had a better life since then. But it was only because she finally said, I know when to say when, and my when is now. You got to know your rock bottom, and you got to know your relationship. This is the Trigger Warning Talk podcast. We are sponsored by Spotify for podcasts, and we're produced by my company, Penton Pending Consulting Solutions, LLC. We got my brother from another mother in the building, Erick Allen. I call him Mr. E.A. Professionally, he's known as E.A. He is a counselor for drug and alcohol abuse. He's a certified drug and alcohol abuse counselor. He's a qualified mental health advocate. He got some other stuff that he's doing that is going to blow people away. We'll talk about that towards the end of this part one. We're talking about Affirmed recovery and his story in this part one of our ongoing series. I want to jump to how you and she mended that fence and what's been going on since then in terms of how you all deal with situations. Because like you said, that happened. It doesn't happen anymore like that.
No.
And you all have such a powerful relationship. What do you all, what was the conversation like from this point forward?
Well, it took some time because it happened in front of an audience. And one thing I learned early, when you do things in front of people, it automatically turns into a show just because it's just one of those things. And when you have an audience, that's what bothers people more than anything. Like if I'd have did it with just me and her, we probably would have got over it in a couple hours. But the fact that I did it in front of friends, family, and an audience, it took a moment. It took a moment of us. I mean, we went to counseling. We did some other things because she was embarrassed. She was a lot of things, So how we got through it was time. Time is the natural healer for a lot of this. Like I've already decided as my life partner, I have no intentions on ever leaving her, ever. Like she's gonna bury me. So with that, I had to find something that I wanted her to know that I mean business. Because you can tell somebody that, and then they'll just take advantage of that. Like, okay, he said he ain't gonna never leave me. Let me just do this. Let me do this. Let me do it. No, no, you can't. So how we got through it was counseling. A lot of communication, a lot of love, and just time. Number one, time. Yes.
I'm glad that you said counseling because Mr. EA, Mr. Qualified Mental Health Advocate, Mr. Certified Alcohol and Drug Counselor, Drug Abuse Counselor, you have a Bachelor of Science degree. But you being a certified and degreed professional, you're a clinician like me.
Yes.
Let's do a deep dive. Because I want to talk to the me.
Okay.
We about to do some barbershop shit right now.
Yes, I love barbershop shit.
Let's go. All right. So, barbershop talk. This is me and you, but we got a worldwide audience. What are your thoughts about counseling? Like for real? Because we know there's a lot of men that say, fuck off. Man, I ain't even talking to nobody. I ain't laying on nobody's couch for 45 minutes doing no damn Q&A. Ain't nobody about to give me a bunch of pills. Ain't nobody going to, put me in no straight jacket. Ain't nobody going to put me in no white padded room. Ain't nobody about to give me no lobotomies and all that shit like we saw in the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I'm just saying.
That's deep.
It's real
That's
talk.
deep.
What did you think about
The first thing I would say is counseling. You got to know what counseling really, really consists of, right? Because what you're talking about, even in your example, the one that flew over Cuckoo's Nest, that was a mental hospital. Those were psychiatrists. Those are actual brain doctors that were men in the fort. Counseling is a little bit different. The secret to counseling is actually helping people navigate what they're going through. We don't give advice. I mean, I'll speak for this counselor. I don't give advice. What I do is walk you through what you're going through, because 9 out of 10 people have the answers within. They need to be taught. Sometimes they have to talk through those answers so they can find the best answer for them. So that's all my job is as a counselor, is to take you to a place where you can make the decision for yourself. You know what I'm saying? I'll give you a bunch of options. I'll spread it out. I'll give you an array of options, but ultimately it is your decision. My thoughts about counseling, I believe that's what's missing. I think mental health, substance abuse is the world's, like my brother says all the time, the world's oldest pandemic, right? We've been dealing with this since before Martin Luther King, before slavery was even in existence. We have mental health issues. So counseling, I believe, is part of the new world order. We as people of color, we gotta start talking to people and learn the difference between counseling and psychiatrist. They're different. Okay.
Okay.
And even as a counselor, I have a counselor. I talk to a counselor once every 2 weeks just because it's therapy. I need it. And I would encourage anybody that's somebody, definitely go seek you some counseling. The secret sauce is finding somebody that you can relate to, because there's counselors all over, but you got to find somebody that you can relate to.
We're going to talk about counseling in depth in part 3, because that's going to be focused on all the modalities that you're aware of, and we're going to do a deep dive more into that part of it. I just want to give people a quick of what you were talking about from your experience just right off the rip. Mm-hmm. I want to jump ahead, but I want to kind of slow it down a bit, because we're still in the barbershop. I'm getting a little trimmed
lined up. Yeah, it's getting the great coverage. I'm getting my great coverage right now. Yeah,
I ain't getting my great coverage because look, bro, I tried this shit one time. It worked. I tried it again. It never worked. And I was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna deal with the great. I'm just gonna get my Obama on, because that's.
Yes, you look good, sir. You look good. Great looks good on you.
I'm just saying. That's all we do. Now, let's keep on the counseling tip though, because men, and we've talked about this ad nauseum, but it's never enough. Yeah. You, me, our brother Will Baptiste. The other Will, Randy, all of these guys, we got together and we created this men's group, and we got on Clubhouse and we started doing men's rooms twice a week, and we were doing all kind of other things dealing with men. When you think about men's mental health specifically, because as you alluded to, I say mental health crisis is the world's oldest continuous pandemic that's been around since the beginning of mankind. And it ain't going nowhere until you deal with the stigmas, the taboos, the stereotypes, the pain, the judgment, the shame, the guilt, the traumas, the ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences. We're going to still be just enveloped in all of this misery and strife. You see it all the time. For you being a certified drug and alcohol counselor, for you being a qualified mental health advocate. And yeah, I'm throwing your credentials out there because I'm going to elevate you, because I'm sick and tired of seeing black men being looked at as beasts and monsters and all of this stuff. Even when we've done wrong, there's always redemption, which we're going to allude to at the end and in part 2.
Okay.
So when you think about how men and men's mental health are dealt with, what did you learn from people in your family and in your environment and in your neighborhood? Because you've heard me talk about emotional suppression and what I was told by male family members. What were you taught about emotional suppression, especially when it comes to DV type stuff?
Well, I was told that men don't cry, men don't talk to counselors. You know what I'm saying? Man, as a man of color, we figure it out. And as I grew up, I totally understand where that comes from. When you think about slavery, when you think about some of the racism, when you think about some of the things that people of color endured, we always persevere. And back in the days, a lot of it was not, counselors were not involved when we persevered. So I understand why that part is not being talked about, because it wasn't used. It wasn't utilized. But now in the new world, it's 2023, right? Yes, that's sir. The way the world evolved. We have to start talking to people. We got to start asking for help, because once I got into the recovery space, I saw where the void is. And the void is stigmas. Of course, we as people of color, we don't talk to counselors. We were told not to talk to, we were told not to trust nobody. And as we grew up, you understand, everything makes sense now, because we grew up, white people were dominant when it comes to being counselors. When I thought about a counselor, I thought about a white man that had keys that was going to lock me up into some kind of psychiatric ward or pump me full of drugs. That was my idea of a counselor. And of course, I'm going to stay away from that type of person. But that is so false. That's a false narrative. It may have been then, but now these days, that is not now. My counselor is a black man. He's super dope. Shout out to Dr. Dempsey. He's a beast. I'm a beast. I know a bunch of more beasts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend the rest of my life changing that narrative about how people of color view counseling. Because I'm dope. I'm a dope counselor, the kind, not that you need counseling for, not that you can get addicted to, right? I'm that good dope. That helps you grow. You know what I mean? So the way I practice my counseling, I love taking negatives and turning everything into a positive. So dope traditionally is a negative word. When you hear dope, you think like, oh my God, heroin, crack, fentanyl. When I think about being dope, I think about just being positive. I think about being energetic. The same feeling that we get when you take drugs, that dopamine release, I know how to make you release that same dopamine just by having a conversation and just experiencing the experience.
With your children, what conversations have you had with them, especially your sons or your son, about domestic violence?
Well, I've told, of course, we can say so much, but our children watch us. They're more into watching what we do than listening to what we do, right? So unfortunately, I've had some domestic violence episodes in the household in front of my son, and I've also got him a counselor. So that's what we did when we burned up some things. We found a way to fix it by, the same way I'm telling you on the screen, get a counselor. I started my son when he was 15 with counseling, and he enjoys it. He goes to counseling often, and that's therapy for him.
I love it.
Yeah.
My father-in-law taught me two of the best words I've ever heard in my whole 52 years and counting on this word. Seek help.
Yes.
When he said that, it was mind blown. I said, it's so simple, but it's so complex. And again, we're going to talk about these modalities in part 3, even in more detail, especially the work that you do. But I do want to touch on some of the work that you do as a certified alcohol and drug abuse counselor. For you, when people come to your office, are you doing only in office in your brick and mortar, or do you do virtual?
Both. I do both. I work for a clinic where we offer medical assisted treatment, which is like methadone, Suboxone, Vivitrol. So we offer that. And my job, when they come to my office, I am on a revolution to change the narrative on what recovery looks like. Because even me, I'm in recovery. I'm definitely in recovery. Before I got in recovery, I thought just the stigma of recovery just sounds so like, oh my God, it's gonna be boring. I'm gonna hate this. So I'm determined to make recovery fun. I have fun. I've been in recovery over 10 years. My drug of choice was cocaine, and for various reasons, I can go in. That's a whole other story. But as I recover, the biggest thing I do, I like to have fun with my patients, with my clientele. I do a lot of music therapy groups. I do a lot of journaling groups. I do a lot of mindfulness, like cognitive meditation, talk therapy. I think talk therapy is leading the charge. I'm one of those guys, like even the clinic I work for, I get written up all the time because I don't use the Betty Ford curriculum, the Hazleton curriculum. I think that's just outdated personally. Fentanyl wasn't in the fold when they made that old curriculum, right? So we gotta attack. We gotta attack this from a whole different perspective. So for me, that's what I do. I meet people where they are. I specialize in meeting people where they are. Like, I love to have a conversation, what we call an assessment. And through that assessment, I'm able to build you a solid treatment plan that consists of music, journaling, of course, talk therapy, and just overall, like, of course, there's a little bit of curriculum because you got to do the work. There's no replacement. I say this all the time. Every single morning I do a live on Instagram where, like we said, we're going to get to it. That's the next part. That's the next chapter. But I do a live, and in every group, I really, I love to just meet people where they are. I don't ask them their drug of choice. I don't ask them like that. I ask them what's going on today and how can I help serve you? How can I get you to a better mindset? Because I think recovery starts in the mind. It's all about the thoughts. It's all about how you process thoughts. That's the first thing that you got to get a hold of is your thoughts process. Then you can work, once you got your mind in check, then you can work on the substance that you may be addicted to. You may be able to, if it's sex that you're addicted to, if it's food, if it's talking shit to people, there's all kind of things you can be in recovery for. You know what I mean? And journaling for me, that's the star. Like, and you know what? And I'm just going to be honest. I didn't start journaling heavily until I met my brother LP and sister Coach K. They were doing a room on Clubhouse. It was a journaling room every Wednesday. And I just started recognizing the feelings that I was having after journaling, after participating in the journaling. I started feeling like, damn, I feel like a new man. So I took that, put my own twist on it. And yes, ever since then, I've been journaling. I've been journaling probably a year solid. Before I even released the journal, I was journaling a year solid.
That's awesome. You know what? We got a few more minutes because we're going to keep it nice and short and sweet because we're going to really deep dive into this stuff as we go along in this part one. We're going to start wrapping it up. I got a few more questions. I'm not going to give you, Mrs. LP, your sister. I always tell people, I got one question with 27 parts, and she was like pulling her hair out and shit. And I'm like, okay, what works when you say, can you keep it about 5? I said, I was about to say try. I was trying.
No trying.
We don't try. We just try. So I said, I was trying to keep it about 5. It won't be more. It won't be in double digits. So, I have a couple more questions. And here's one. When you think about the work that you've done, you in particular, Mr. E.A.,
okay,
to go from being someone who committed some acts of domestic violence to someone who is a proponent of counseling and therapy and not committing acts of domestic violence, what do you say to people who may say, you know what, I'm a person who believes that I can just pray it away, I can just smoke it away, I can just drink it away, I can just snort it away. Hey, tomorrow's another day. We'll worry about it tomorrow. What do you say to some of those mindsets?
Well, I first start off by letting people know I ain't no judge. I ain't got no heaven or hell to put you in. So, for me, I'm huge in responsibility. I preach responsibility. So, I'm heavy into making sure you got to work, take care of home, go to work, be on time to work, go to sleep, get your 8 hours of sleep in, get your exercise, make sure you work on your body. Okay. And then after you do those components, if you think that some substance is right for you, I'm not going to be the one to tell you no. As long as you put those things first, to me, that's the combat for addiction. Responsibility, being responsible. So I tell any and everybody, make sure you being responsible. Responsibility is number uno. Whatever you do after you be responsible, taking care of your family, going to work, getting proper sleep, getting proper exercise. If you can find room when you're doing those things really successfully, if you can find room to take some drugs, boy, have at it. Okay, have one for me too. I've learned after doing those works, it's impossible. I advocate a little bit of marijuana because I believe marijuana has a therapeutic value to it, but there's no other substance that I see that can add value to you. So when people come to me and they have a heroin problem or that such and such problem, my first thing is to definitely encourage them to find things to replace it, because you can't just stop. Can't just stop something. I'm not going to tell you, stop, you better stop. No, right. My job is to lead you to healthier habits to help you take your mind away and your focus away from that. And sometimes some people, I learned, man, if you listen to some of my old podcasts, I at first didn't believe in medical assisted treatment. I thought that was a joke. Now that I work in the environment, I I take all that back. Some people do need it, and it works. I've seen it work for people. So just depend on who I'm speaking to, what's going on. That determines the conversation. There is no cookie cutter. There's no one answer, no one size fits all answer. It's based on the conversation, the individual. It's based on the assessment. It's based on where they come from and where they want to go. So I hope that answers the question.
Oh, yeah. My last question to you is this, before we get into our shameless plug segment.
Okay.
Because you got some stuff going on that just is bananas.
B.nanas.
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 If you could write a letter or email to little Mr. E.A, when he was just anywhere between birth and 17, what would you say?
Damn. I would tell him in the letter. I'd probably be so scattered. I would have so much to say. I would somewhere in the letter, I would definitely encourage him to seek God first, because I've had the best success when I do that. When I've done that, when I incorporated seeking God first, my life has changed. In that same letter, I would tell him to watch who he give himself to, because one thing about sex, it is the strongest drug on the planet. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Say it again. Sex is the strongest drug on the planet. And when you give yourself to people, it's like giving a piece of your soul to a person. So imagine being 19, 20, and you had multiple sex partners. You've given yourself to those people that you can't ever give back. So I would tell my younger self, keep your dick to yourself, brother. Make sure that you have a purpose when you use this tool. Okay? This tool is not to be misused. Okay?
That's right.
What I would tell. God first, seek God, and then, hey, keep your dick to yourself. Those are the two. That will make up the body of the letter for sure.
I love it. And hey, it's your letter. Just like this is your interview. We're talking with my brother, certified alcohol and drug abuse counselor / qualified mental health advocate / podcaster / author. And hold on, let me pull the screen share down, because I want the audience to see this. Hold on a second. Look at what I got, y'all. The Affirmations for Recovery Journal, written by Mr. E.A. Never leave home without it. Again, you can get this on Amazon.
Yes. And they can see my beautiful picture on the back.
Yeah, let me put it up close to the screen.
Yes. Yeah. So while he's doing that, guys, I definitely dedicate that to my mom. Shout out to my mother, man, because literally she gave me the inspiration to do this book, Recovery. I watched my mom go through recovery, and I see my mom, like how she did it. She did a lot of self-talk, like positive self-talk. So I took a lot of what I saw her do and I put it into a journal. And I know I say it every day, there is no replacement for doing the work when it comes to recovery. You cannot buy it. Let me go in my pocket and try to write a check to get recovery. No, it doesn't work like that. You have to get in here, roll your sleeves up, and you got to do the work. And it's got to be consistent. It's not one day. It's a lifestyle change.
And it's $3.99. That's the other thing. So it's $3.99. So we just gonna end it right there, because Mrs. LP is like, hey, we got some stuff that we got to do. I sent you that flyer. Throw it away, because I'm putting your episode out tonight.
Damn it!
I'm putting it out tonight. I ain't got to edit nothing. I'm just going to change the date on there or whatever. It'll come out tonight. I'll send you the links when they come available, when we get back home and all this stuff. I want to thank you so much, Mr. E.A. Mrs. LP says hi. She's standing there looking at me.
Hi, Mrs. LP.
I'm trying to get her to come here and she ain't going to do it. Let me see if she'll do it.
Come on, sister. Come on. I need to see your face.
She does that kind of creepy, like,
I don't know where the camera is.
Go ahead.
Hi, beautiful. That's the wind. That's the wind beneath your wings, sir.
I got to bring our sister Queen Loyalty in on this
Hey,
because she's
Queen
like, hey,
Loyalty. Hi.
Listen, it was such a great interview. I feel honored to be able to take a back seat and just be a fly on the wall and listen. It was so
that's all right.
good.
This is what
Yes.
families do. So look, I want to put this out today. I want to thank you, Mr. EA, for coming on the Trigger Want to Talk podcast, sharing your story. Part 2, folks, is going to be about everything that you want to know about journaling, including his book, The Affirmations for Journal Recovery. And we're going to deep dive into everything about journaling. I want to bring up his information back on the screen so you all can see his social media links. He has a 10K card. He also has a podcast called the Affirmations for Recovery Podcast. He has a podcast called Meet the Allens. He's on IG as EA the Genius. There's so much that you do, man. Like I'm telling you, I'm gonna do an ancestry on you myself. You got some Jamaican shit in you. I don't care what you're talking about.
You
Man.
know what you
Hey,
forgot,
when I hear
brother?
people,
He is the professional middleman, okay? Let's put some
yes,
respect on it. He is the professional
yes.
middleman.
Look, I'm gonna have your links in the show notes. So if they want to, like you heard me say, Google me. You want to know about Google me. So I'm gonna have your links in the show notes. You can also find them on a Clubhouse and on the OWL app.
Yes.
OWWLL on the OWL app. He's a brand ambassador, just like Queen Loyalty. EA, how do you like being number 2 to number 1 as a brand ambassador to
I don't
Loyalty?
know. How does that feel? I would love to
Hey, you
answer
know
that
what?
question.
You know what? Honestly, I'm not into competing with my teammates. Like we together, we're stronger together. If you look at our analytics together, we killing it together. I don't even see us separate. I see us together.
That ain't what she said. She
Yeah,
like
well,
Well,
you
Jordan.
know,
Hey,
we,
I ain't
we are
taking no.
together, but I'm number one, but we together, okay? So
being number one, being number one is a state of mind. If she says she's number one, then shit, damn it, I'm number one too.
you're number one too. And guess what, LP? You're number one for doing this interview because it was dope.com. So I want to tell the
Dope.
people, make sure y'all watching, make sure y'all like, comment, and subscribe. And make sure you
Engage.
check into the next trigger warning podcast. I'm telling you, because it's gonna
Trigger
be a
warning
banger.
talk. Don't forget
Trigger
that
warning
Yeah,
talk.
too.
You
all
gotta put
four
some respect
words.
on
Yes,
If
that
you don't
talk is
see that
the
logo in the corner, it ain't us.
that
it.
talk is the
Look,
strongest part. Yes.
look,
Trigger warning talk. Yes, it's gonna be a
look.
banger.
We're gonna stop right here because again,
Okay.
in part 2, we're gonna get into some more stuff about journaling, everything about journaling. That's the whole interview is gonna be about his journaling, everything about journaling, and why it's important for if you identify as a male specifically, why we talk about journaling and why he started this journal. So I got to jump into this last part about this missing person case. On the Drink Want to Talk podcast, we end every episode with a missing person case. This case involves a young woman from Houston, Texas. Her name is DeUndrea Ford. She's been missing since September 22nd of this year. And I want to play the story from the Fox affiliate, Fox 26 in Houston. And we're going to look at this story. It's a very short story, but it's very captivating because it's been all kind of twists and turns since that little bit of information came out. Check this out for us, folks.
Tonight, new details on the missing Houston woman who was last seen getting into a van outside of the bikini bar where she worked as a dancer. Court documents now show that DeUndrea Ford, she was a key witness in a capital murder case. Fox 26's Sherman DeSalle joining us live now from the newsroom to break this case down for us. Sherman.
Yeah, it's a lot of information. As tonight, police have no new details on DeUndrea's whereabouts. But our newsroom has managed to find out that the 21-year-old was a witness in a shooting in May that left one man dead. 4 people were arrested in this case, including a former Harris County detention officer. Court documents state that on May 10th, DeUndrea Ford and 21-year-old Kitiana Taylor traveled to Baton Rouge, Louisiana to work as dancers and prostitutes for clients brought to them by 35-year-old Otis Parker. Parker was driving Taylor and Ford home from Louisiana with the cash the women made there, according to documents. Police say text messages from Taylor indicate she was planning a setup to rob Parker of at least $1,500 in cash when they arrived at an apartment complex on Selinsky Road early that morning. Parker was shot and killed. 22-year-old Jamal Brown, also known as Bam, was listed as the shooter, and 22-year-old Jarrell Wheeler was listed as an accomplice, along with Kitiana Taylor and 20-year-old Mariah Green. Jamal Brown was killed a month later in a shootout with police. He had been on the run from the capital murder charge. The three other suspects, including Jarrell Wheeler, a former Harris County detention officer, remains in jail. Now, whether or not the shooting in May is related to DeUndrea Ford's disappearance, that's yet to be confirmed. I reached out to Ford's grandmother, who I spoke to yesterday, to get a comment, but I haven't heard back as of right now. Reporting from the newsroom, Sherman DeSalle, Fox 26 News.
As we always do, we talk about true crime cases, and on the true crime, we do a missing person case. 99% of those cases are about melanated folks, because I wanted to bring the same energy and media attention to these cases that we don't typically see in mainstream media. I will give credit to some of these news outlets that some of the local affiliates are showing more stories about missing men, women, and children who are melanated than we've seen historically in past cases. So shout out to Fox 26. They've been all over this story since it happened back on September 22nd. I want to let you all know that I will have a link to this story, as well as the link to, or the links, I should say, to EA's information in the show notes at the bottom of this episode. I want to thank you all for being part of the Trigger Wanna Talk podcast. Loyalty, I got to get you on here next, but you just stay tuned. We're going to talk about setting up a date and time. In closing, live in awareness, never live in fear. Take a first aid, CPR, stop the bleed class, like Loyalty did. I got the pictures to prove it, because it's not a matter of if, it's not a matter of if, but when and where an emergency is going to happen. And we want you to be an immediate responder to someone like myself, who's the first responders, can show up and show out and do what we need to do, because you just never know. Stuff happens all the time, everywhere. I get breaking news stories every day, still to this day, and it don't stop. For the Trigger Wanna Talk podcast, for EA, for Queen Loyalty, LP out.
We out.